All right. Copied, going live. Boom. In on both. This is the first stream to Instagram and to YouTube at the same time. So if you're in, please go on and say hello. But I thought I'd make this video because it's kind of fun and something I've been thinking about for a while. So how's it going, everybody? This is Jordan Pacheco from the Glad Chad podcast. I hope you're doing well. And I had kind of a funny story and a funny thought that I've been kind of puzzling over for the past couple of days. So first, let me highlight this illustration. The title, you might go, uh-oh, Jordan, you're losing your trad card, but here, chill, chill, chill. Let me explain. So I went to go visit some family over the weekend, and as one is to do when they're with family, I went to where they go to mass. So I actually went to a Saturday evening anticipatory mass, which it's been a hot second since that happened. And this was a Novus Ordo, you can also imagine, in kind of a suburban parish style, kind of a church in the round, one of those ugly things they built in the 80s, but the inside was okay. So mass was fine and everything was good, but I decided afterwards that I wanted to go to Latin mass still. So the next morning I actually went to the traditional Latin mass in town, and I got to actually meet some parishioners and priest who I knew, and that was really nice. So there I am driving home, minding my own business, and then I thought to myself, okay, when it comes to the questions of the liturgy, when it comes to questions of the Latin Mass versus the Novus Ordo, sometimes we fall into these broad camps. And so the camps might be described as this. There are those who are Latin Mass only or bust. They don't participate in the Novus Ordo. They very much subscribe that the Novus Ordo is deficient. Some of them even might believe that it's invalid, right? That it's sinful to attend. That it's harmful to the faithful and in a various degrees, not just over time, but even in its immediacy, that it's invalid is the biggest thing. Then there are those who are kind of like, okay, so the Novus Ordo is valid, but validity is not in and of itself enough of a bellwether on how good something is. Taylor Marshall has a very famous phrase, right, where it's, how is your marriage? And he says, well, valid. If you said your marriage is valid, it doesn't really indicate that your marriage is good. It just says, oh, congratulations, it's valid. So inside that camp, you have people who go, okay, Latin Mass is important. It's good. It's a patrimony of the church. It needs to be fought for. But the Novus Ordo is not, it is valid. And so in the event that you cannot attend a Latin Mass or maybe a different rite, you should go to the new Mass. And then there might be others. I've met a few of them. I hear them kind of from some boomer stories, you could say, I get from my friends. And these are people who really were happy that the Latin Mass was canceled, and they thought that you ought to continue having it canceled. So the point is, I'm driving down and I realize, okay, I've now living in a diocese that's gone through a big contraction. I'm seeing parishes, very pretty ones, that are empty. And that really does hurt. It hurts when you have that beautiful architecture, but the liturgy didn't match it. And these communities just completely vanished. So if I was Pope Leo right now, would I just sign with one magnificent swipe of my pen? Would I just get rid of the Novus Ordo? Is the Novus Ordo that harmful to the faithful that it has to be like a serious illness, just taken care of once and for all? And I realized my answer was no. I didn't think that that was a prudent judgment. And here's something that might be very surprising for a lot of you, but I feel like even though I, of course, call myself a trad, and hopefully I still have my card after this talk. Nonetheless, I do attend the new Mass from time to time, not so much because I desire it or I crave it or I'm trying to do 50-50, but it's mostly because of family circumstance, right? I'm the kind of person who doesn't think that it's always the best idea to divide up when the family goes to Mass together, for instance. I don't think that is what being a traditionalist calls for. So, of course, I'm happy to join my family at Mass, and I still believe it's a Mass. And when I was here at this last Novus Ordo, I was looking up at the consecration, and I'm just always struck, no matter if it's in the Latin Mass or it's in the new Mass or it's in the Eastern rites, that is the Eucharist, Christ's body, blood, soul, and divinity. So, do I hate the Novus Ordo? Rather, why I don't hate the Novus Ordo. And in order to, again, kind of talk about it, there's just some things that have to be understood. I don't hate the Novus Ordo. And I don't think that because I don't hate it, it means that I'm going to therefore fight for its preservation, although there is something to be said for it. And let me break it down this way. First off, I don't hate the Novus Ordo Because first off, how could I hate that which taught me how to love Christ? Now, it wasn't just in and of itself the new mass, and I found a greater depth, obviously, of my faith and my Catholicism because of the traditional Latin Mass. I've begun to understand the universality of the church, not just across our present time, but back throughout all of history and probably into the future because of the traditional Latin Mass. So many more things make sense when I believe you adhere to the traditional Latin Mass as opposed to the Novus Ordo. And it's been very frustrating because for the past, let's say I've been going to TLM for 5 years now, 6 years now, pretty constantly. It's just been a game of catch up. The fact that I didn't know how to pray an Ave Maria or a Pater Noster, the fact that I didn't know what an Asperges was, the fact that I had seen pictures and prayer cards and even movies from a time different than my own, and I couldn't quite understand. I knew it was a mass. I knew that it was valid, sacred. I knew it was beautiful, more beautiful than anything I had ever experienced, and yet I just couldn't quite figure out what they were doing, what they were saying. The fact that for millions of Catholics, their patrimony has been ripped away from them has been a lot that I've been pondering over these years. I'm still playing catch up. There are plenty of prayers that people whose children have attended the traditional Latin Mass since they were little, they have, and I simply don't have. And that's been unfortunate, but that's just the reality of where I'm at right now. I'm trying, kids. I'm trying. But why don't I hate the Novus Ordo? So number one, that is how I was baptized. So I can't just turn my back on everything. I can't just think, okay, my sacraments are invalid because I don't know if they were said in Latin. I remember my first communion very distinctly. At my first communion, I received on my hand. That I would completely do away with. Obviously, communion in the hand, I do believe is a sacrilege. There's plenty of people far smarter than me who have outlined why. I tend to be just a very I'm a simple kind of man, right? So when I think of how communion should be received, it's very simple. It's as we lex orandi, lex credendi, right? The law of practice is the law of belief. Essentially, this. If we really do believe that it is Jesus Christ, body, blood, soul, and divinity, then we should not treat the Eucharist as we do ordinary food. I'm not taking a hamburger. I'm not taking a bunch of pancakes. But there is something so set apart when you're receiving kneeling on the tongue from a priest that really does reinforce subtly, but throughout the entirety of your life, that this is indeed Jesus Christ, the Lamb of God, who's taken away the sins of the world, that he is there, right, under the species of bread and wine. And that's been completely gutted out of the faithful. So that's why we're in such a huge Eucharistic glut. So at my first communion, yes, I received on my hand because they didn't teach us any other way. And I remember very distinctly, they were saying, well, you're making a throne for Jesus. And so even though I believed I was receiving as reverent as I could have known, I didn't know any better. In fact, sometimes when I would see communion on the tongue, I had a friend whose cousin would come into town and he would do that. They were traditional Latin Mass attendees. I thought it was weird. I was like, well, that's such a grandiose gesture. And even then, despite the fact that I believed ever since my first communion that it was indeed the body, blood, soul, and divinity of our Lord, I still thought it was weird that we were somehow treating it better. So that's one knell. It was very difficult. But nonetheless, I'm grateful that, I grew up in a family that had the Mass, even if it was the new Mass as opposed to no Mass. I've been really, really meditating on this because, again, living now in a diocese that's gone through the closing of parishes, I just have this great anguish in my soul, the idea that there were more Masses in the world not too long ago. And now in this diocese, objectively, there are less. And yes, of course, the Mass is the Mass. I'm not negating that for a bit. Of course, the Mass is the Mass, and all the Masses of the world are plugged into that eternal sacrifice that our Lord gives of himself on Calvary, right? So the Mass, it is the Mass. You might have a million Masses or one Masses, but they're all the same Mass. We are forever locked in, past, present, and future, into that supreme moment of Christ giving of himself, right? Of finishing what he was set out to do. But that being said, yeah, it sucks. It sucks going past churches that are closed. It sucks going past churches that don't have communities anymore. It sucks thinking about how many hundreds or thousands or millions of Catholics went through a place and left the faith because they weren't properly catechized or they weren't given the tools in a lot of places, I think, to really grow deeper with the Lord. You might seem like, oh man, Jordan, this is all a pretty damning judgment call on the Novus Ordo. And yet you still don't hate it. How could you not hate it? And again, like I said, I've been really wrestling with this, but yes, it taught me Christ first. The second thing is because I do a lot of work with priests. This is going to sound crazy. I know that there are some trads who aren't going to like this, but I've met enough priests, quite a bit of them, especially these younger priests, this generation coming up, who are really trying their guts out. And sometimes when you're an armchair general, you're just a trad lady sitting off on the side. It's very easy for us to go, well, it's simple, Padre. Just celebrate the Church of Latin Mass and don't care about what your bishop says. Don't care about what could happen to you. Just do it, right? Don't care about what the Pope says. But you have to understand that we shouldn't be living in a church of rupture. Now, of course, the reformers, and even before the reformers, there's always been ruptures in the church. But in the past 60, 70 years, we have lived in rupture. We have lived with a very grand departure from tradition. It certainly has stretched a lot of the core of what it means to be Catholic to the edge. And when I see a priest who is trying his tail off, he celebrates the new Mass, and I've met them, I've talked to plenty of them, I work with some of them. Yes, he celebrates the new Mass, but he loves the Roman canon. He doesn't understand why it was taken. So he refuses to say any of the other Eucharistic prayers. He always says Eucharistic prayer number 1, the Roman canon. And he does ad orientem. He's trying to incorporate Latin. And he's trying to make sure that in a parish he has to manage, and sometimes that parish is really a couple of parishes jammed together, he's trying to really be a proper pastor to those souls. He's not trying just to go hard right after we've had decades of hard left, because that is what the reformers did. The reformers took the tradition of the church and swung it hard to the left. They hid it under the guise of a bunch of Catholic buzzwords, the new evangelization, springtime, right? The spirit of the age, and they completely ripped away the patrimony of the church. It would be incorrect, trads, I think, to just completely go hard to the right. Like Pope Leo comes out tomorrow in the Logia and he says, the Latin Mass is the unique expression of the Roman Rite, and furthermore, I abscond the new Mass. If a priest offers the new Mass, let him be anathema. I don't think that would be helpful. I think that the amount of riot and really damage to the faithful that would cause would actually be worse than the continuation of the new Mass trending, I think, in 2 directions. Number 1, the first direction is very simple. Parishes that are staying liberal or lukewarm are dying. And COVID helped exacerbate this process, but certainly there's just a lot of parishes right now that are hurting. And that really sucks. And we've met priests who just are unwilling to change. They're unwilling to do the work because for many of them, for decades sometimes, they've been relegated to a community leader, whether that's by their own selves or by external factors. They've been relegated to just kind of the back. They don't really run their parishes. They don't really have an opinion on the liturgy, if you will, except they know that they don't want it in Latin. And they will continue to allow their ever dwindling geriatric congregation not really have an experience of tradition. I'm not trying to just besmirch and say, oh, we're on a superior level as trads. It's just unfortunate. It's unfortunate when you go to a church like this Novus Ordo I went to, and you kind of just identify some problem points. You go, yeah. And I remember hearing this when I was a kid and being like, yeah, I'm not going to sing that hymn, right? Why is God infantilized? When you go to the traditional Latin Mass, I think it's very, very humbling, but also very awesome in the supreme effect of the word that the congregation, whether they're 80 or 40 or 20 or 5, these are the hymns and the prayers of not just their immediate time, but also the hymns, the prayers, the way of worship of their ancestors. And you don't have a generational divide of liturgical worship. Everyone's all together. So it's something that is very, very interesting that I've really been thinking about. But at the same time, I just think, again, it's very easy for sometimes as trads for us to sit in the armchair general position and just say, if it's not the Latin Mass, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to participate, and I'm going to cause some infighting in my family unnecessarily because I'm now going to turn my back on every single thing that they taught me. That doesn't seem right to me. And the word pastoral is such a bludgeon, right? I think a lot of spirit of the age Catholics use it to beat trads over the head into obedience and submission. They use it in order to explain why you can't have your altar rails and why you can't have communion on the tongue and why you can't have sacred music. But there is a genuine pastoral strain with a good father, right? And so one thing about a father is that if he is trying to guide his family, let's say that you have a family that eats too much junk food and everyone's starting to get a little bit pudgy. Yeah, cold turkey would be a really good idea, right? If you're like, okay, yeah, you could do that. There might be some members of the family that could totally do that. But probably easier is going to be praise, substitution, and alternative. So for instance, you might say, well, listen, we can't eat junk food tonight, guys. So we're not going to go out for ice cream. However, I found a healthy alternative, and slowly and steadily we can kind of right this ship around. It's a bad analogy. I get it. But I'm just trying to highlight the fact that I find that a lot of the reformers did such a cold thing when they gutted the old mass that I don't think it would be just right in and of itself for us to gut the new mass. Now, just right away, because I'm seeing again with these young priests, just a really gentle, well, not always gentle even, a very deliberate actually push to tradition. It would not be surprising, I said this in my last stream, if in 10 years from now, 20% of masses offered, certainly in the United States, were Latin masses. I know that sounds crazy, but if you think about a short time ago how it was the indult mass, some of you remember masses celebrated in more gym basements and in Marriott hotels. And now look where it is. Even Pope Francis and Traditionis Custodes couldn't kill it. There's been some really positive signs, I think, signaled from Pope Leo, but we'll have to remain to be seen what he does. Nonetheless, I still think that demographics are destiny. The demographics don't lie. And so it's not going to be surprising to me if I do see in 10 years, like 20% of Latin masses. And then people can shut up about saying that trads are only like 1% of the church or something that they pretend to do. So that's always something that I really think about. Now, the next thing, why don't I hate the Novus Ordo? Well, number one, again, it taught me to love Christ, and I'm grateful to my parents for taking me. I think it was far better for my faith that they took me to Mass and they didn't. Number two is why I don't hate the Novus Ordo is because, again, I just see these really positive changes that move us to the traditional Latin Mass. And I support that. I support priests who really are working hard in their parishes. I don't deliberately seek out even kind of reverent Novus Ordos, right? I tend to obviously go to traditional Latin Mass. I call myself a Latin supremacist. I do believe that the traditional Latin Mass is the unique expression of the Roman Rite. I do think that there are defects in the Novus Ordo. By these defects, I just mean to say that my buddy, like, go to the Traditional Thomist channel. He has 10,000 hours on these exact points, right? The issues of the Mass as a sacrifice, for instance, which is very true. Growing up, many of you might remember, so I'm born in the mid-90s, so growing up in the early 2000s, yeah, the Eucharistic celebration, the Eucharistic banquet was a meal. We did not talk about it as the holy sacrifice of the Mass. But, fun fact, I'm seeing more of that conversation, more of that terminology being used in the churches around. So something's clearly in the water because we can't keep hemorrhaging like this. I really do encourage, I've been meditating on this too. I'm the only trad in my family. And I feel like there's some closet ones, right? Like, I think of my father. My dad once told me that if Latin Mass was closer, he would go. But also, I think it would probably cause some infighting in the family, and it's probably prudent that he doesn't. Really, my dad needs an Anglican ordinariate. So, Dad, if you're watching, an Anglican ordinariate, I think, would actually be perfectly your speed. But something that I've really been kind of sorting through is how we're going to get out of this mess, because we do have this tale of two churches. And a contrast point that I saw was, again, going to Saturday anticipatory Novus Ordo and then going to Sunday morning low Mass and just being struck by, Latin Mass doesn't just draw automatically the cream of the crop of Catholics. And we need to stop getting away from allowing people to pigeonhole us in this. So the reason that Catholics dress better at Latin Mass, generally speaking, the reason why they score higher in Orthodoxy marks isn't just because they're the top 20% of Catholics, but because I believe, sort of, well, how would I say? Oh, well, it's very simple. It's because you look at that and you recognize, I think, obviously deeper, that if the God of the universe is real, and if he was incarnate in the flesh almost 2,000 years ago, and if he suffered and died for my sins and your sins, and so much did he desire to leave his word upon the faithful that he founded a church, and he gave this church a promise that the gates of hell will not prevail against it. And if he is still with and guiding the church as the invisible head of his church right now, if that's the case, what would worship look like for him? I have taken Protestants, I have taken people with no religion to both forms of the Mass. I've taken them to the Novus Ordo, I've taken them to Latin Mass. And when I've gotten the strongest reactions from these people, it always happens at Latin Mass. A really good Protestant buddy of mine, he's gone with me to the Novus Ordo. It was tit for tat, so I went with him to a Protestant service. Their denomination's unique because apparently they do weekly communion. This is a big deal. As Catholics, I'm like, funny, weird. It's just a symbol for you people, but whatever. When he took him to the Novus Ordo, he didn't really have that strong of a reaction. He was like, okay, cool. I kind of get how Catholics do their thing, and that's fine. I said, all right, cool. And then when he came to visit me one day, we went to Latin Mass, High Mass. And he said something that I really, really has always stuck with me. He goes, I think I understand the difference between Protestants and Catholics. With Protestantism, it's just water. It's just a cracker. It's just smoke that makes you cough. But with Catholics, everything has a symbolic and a deeply symbolic nature at that. It's holy water. And of course, I'm using symbolic, not in the pejorative of it's just a symbol, but I'm just saying there's meaning behind these things. What is blessed water? You have to understand, holy water does not exist in the vast majority of Protestantism. And it's like priestly orders get holy water. That's like it. So the idea that like we have things like blessed salt and we combine this with this water and now it's holy water and we exercise the water. I mean, we have these particular blessings for water at the Feast of the Epiphany, for instance, and I have a bottle of it sitting somewhere over here. This is very, very unique for those whose families have been Protestant for a very long time. The fact that we have a very regimented structure of the Mass, that we expect and desire our priest to say the black and do the red. The fact that we are happy when the priest faces the east, when he turns his back, quote unquote, on the people, because we recognize that that's him not talking to us. He's not pantomiming. He's not acting for us. He's having a deep spiritual moment with God, and we are able to be drawn up into that as laity. The fact that when, all of us growing up, I had never seen Mass ad Orientem until I was about 19 or 20. Never had seen it. But everyone has a prayer card with the priest with his canonical digits, right? Ad Orientem, lifting the host or listing English is hard, or lifting the chalice up to God. And there is something about that precision. There's something about that delicacy. There's something about the intricacy that immediately tells even the most atheistic person that these people take what is happening up on that altar seriously. And how we receive communion, we come back down, right? And to receive kneeling on the tongue. The King of Kings has condescended to our plane. He is body, blood, soul, and divinity present in the bread and the wine. It does become the body, blood, soul, and divinity of our Lord. Like, how you can't even fathom it, but it does. How should that be received? And unfortunately, the vast majority of new masses, the vast majority of my experience, technically, because I'd have to go to Latin Mass exclusively for another 20, let's say 25, 24 years in order to break even. Even though I believe that it was body, blood, soul, and divinity, how many times did I not receive fully understanding? Like, how is it that going to Latin Mass, these top 20% of Catholics doing the thing, how is it that going to Latin Mass that way has somehow made me receive less because I just am more attuned with the realization of my own sinfulness, or when I'm not properly disposed than when I went to the new Mass? How is it that when worship is done like that, naturally, right? No one pulls you aside. You just say, oh man, I got to dress up for this thing. I dress up for a job interview. I dress up for the symphony. I dress up for a really great date at a really cool restaurant. Why would I not dress up for Mass? And if we have turned, as we have done for 6 years, we've turned Mass into something where it's acceptable to attend in board shorts and a Hawaiian shirt. It's acceptable to roll up in your yoga pants and your sloppy t-shirts. It's acceptable to roll up in your raggedy jeans and whatever else you want, right? And nobody, come as you are, it's all fine. Well, God does want you. He does want you intimately as you are, but he doesn't leave us as we are, right? God wants us as we are because he takes us in and transforms us. He says, my grace is sufficient for thee. He takes us up. He tells us to sin no more. He takes us up, and we have our part to play in that story of salvation. Latin Mass demands that of you, and it does so organically. It doesn't have to be grandiose about it. I love what Shia LaBeouf says to Bishop Barron. They're doing an interview, and Shia LaBeouf just wants to talk about the Latin Mass. He wants to talk about Catholicism. He's chomping at the bit. And he tells Bishop Barron, I prefer the Latin Mass. Bishop Barron asks him why. And he says very simply, because I feel like they're not trying to sell me a car. That is certainly something that gives serious pause, because I feel like they're not trying to sell me a car. The Novus Ordo, I think, does do that. I think the Novus Ordo, even good Novus Ordos, you just kind of get a performance to it that Latin Mass doesn't. I've heard this thing where when you have a priest celebrating Ad Orientem, one of the points also is that you don't have a relationship with the priest. Maybe his bald spot, but not the priest. But you do have a relationship with God. And you have a relationship with God in persona Christi through the priest, right? Man, that sounds like a lot of mean, negative things to say about the Novus Ordo. There certainly are some criticisms. But it's very, very simple. And then the final thing I just want to bring up is this. So I was at another Novus Ordo, fun fact, and one nearby my house, and those folks there are really trying to make it a reverent Novus Ordo, and what you see are kind of three generations in the way they worship. You have the older generation, maybe they were children during the Reforms, or maybe they were, living even before the Reforms, and they just have such a way of just not plugging into anything traditional. So at the end of this Novus Ordo, for instance, they chant the Salve Regina, and the boomers don't sing. God bless boomers. They sing at Latin Mass. Some of you all fought really, really hard, and I respect that. Novus Ordo boomers don't sing in Latin, and they wear their cargo shorts, and then they leave during the closing hymn that always drove me up a wall. They talk very loudly during the kids' piece. This isn't just boomers, by the way, but you know the mentality. Nonetheless, and it sucks. You're like, ah. And then, there's a generation behind it. They're the generation now in their 40s, and they're better for sure. That Gen X kind of generation, they don't do a lot of happy clappy stuff. They knew that the tambourines were cheesy when they were kids, and they don't really like it. But what they really like are those really like flowy piano Novus Ordos. We've all been to them, the piano bar Novus Ordo. I myself from the bread of life, that thing, or where they do that interlude underneath communion. You all know what I'm talking about. Ugh, Lordy. But they get it. They're trying. I appreciate the try. I appreciate the attempt. Maybe I'm giving more credence to attempt than maybe some of my fellow trads. God bless us. And then this generation, which is like me and those a little bit younger, right? You have these millennials and these Gen Z. And here's the thing. For any Catholic in the modern era, if you're going to be a Catholic who actually is attending Mass, that's an extraordinarily deliberate act. You're not just doing that because everyone in your village does it, so why wouldn't you? You're not doing it because you get to socialize with cute girls and have donuts afterwards, though those are absolutely awesome perks. You had to, oftentimes, plenty of Catholics have had falling away, coming back, and deep versions or reversion moments. And these are the people who are in the pews because they really have to. When I was in Los Angeles, I was going to Mass, not just because it was what I did my entire life, and what else are you going to do on a Sunday? I went to Mass because I was at a low point in my life, because I was broke and I was needing work and there was temptation all around, and I needed the strong medicine of the Catholic religion. You will start to see more chapel veils with these people. You will start to see people dressed up a little bit more. You will start to see people, if they're there at that age, they're taking the faith seriously. It's not something casual. It's not something cultural. Anyone who's my age who's attending Mass has to be very deliberate about it. And so God is always calling us into deeper conversion. And I believe in those moments that people really are striving to have a deep vert moment through those practices. One of the weird things that happened is, ironically, the Reformers kind of told us that the externals don't matter, and then proceed to make a bunch of ugly externals like churches in the round and stuff. But man is a composite of body and soul. So yes, the externals do matter. They're not as important as the internals. The body isn't as important as the soul. But since we're a fusion of both of them, it's obvious that they have to work together. So isn't it obvious? It's just human psychology for thousands of years. that if we make our liturgies reverent, if we make our masses beautiful, if we make sure that we are being serious spiritual fathers to each other, and if priests are making sure that they're being good spiritual fathers to their flock, would it not make sense that we're going to help them every little nudging that happens to let people look around and go, yeah, I suppose the Catholic faith is real. Why wouldn't we have this expressed in sacred architecture? Why wouldn't we have this expressed in sacred music? Why wouldn't we have this expressed in serious and authentic Catholic culture? The final thing I'll leave you with is this. I don't hate the new Mass. I don't hate something which I have a lot of positive memories in. You might say that was my family, but I do believe because Jesus was there with me. And I remember being a boy, altar serving, and I would look up when even one of our more hippy-dippy priests would do the consecration and being granted that beautiful grace to really seriously believe in the real presence, to really, really believe, though I still don't understand, and I certainly didn't understand when I was a boy, how it is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of our Lord. But I think the positive thing I'm seeing with Novus Ordos, more and more of them becoming more reverent, and that used to be more of a unicorn term, but it's more possible now with these younger priests coming out, is very simple. And that is that the Catholic Church is getting done with its identity crisis. We have been in such a deliberately given confusion for almost a century now. And there are swaths of the Catholic faith, swaths of the laity, swaths of the clergy who don't actually believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, and certainly not his church. They might have the trappings of it. They might even do a lecture time to time telling you to obey or to put on your mask or something. But they don't actually really believe the faith. But when you find priests and you find laity who are, it's only natural, for the sake of the survival of some of these dioceses, it's only natural that they're going to trend more reverent, and therefore they're going to trend more traditional. Some people have talked about, well, does the Latin Mass have things to learn from the Novus Ordo? And I would say I think the Second Vatican Council gave us that answer. I like how the epistle and the gospel are read in the vernacular after they're read in Latin. Making sure that we are staying in the entire tradition, the patrimony of the church, by making sure that we are hearing the same words our ancestors heard. And then, of course, we can hear it in our own tongue as it ought to be expressed. Cool. I'm happy with that. I don't have much else. I don't have much else, because notice that when the Novus Ordos become reverent, they are simply drawing on the tradition of the church. And what I've learned is that even if we've been to a new Mass and they've had a bad singer, well, plain chant's really easy to learn and a congregation can sing it. And also it's just more low key when you go to Mass, and it's just plain chant, the Kyrie, the Gloria, the Sanctus. I'm sorry, there was a car horn in the background. There's something far more just beautiful about it. The faith being expressed in this very simple, again, very organic sort of way. So I'm looking forward to, and I welcome, sometimes I think that, I know that there are priests who celebrate the Novus Ordo who watch my show. And Michael, thank you for saying this. I enjoy your balanced, charitable, and insightful talks. I'm just keeping it real, you know? But I know that there are priests out there who are really struggling because they would love to celebrate a traditional Latin Mass and they don't have the chance to, but they're able to really do more traditional things in their parishes, and they're trying to make sure that they're not going to lose too many congregates along the way, but they want to kind of gently kind of push and guide. And I just have to say, you guys, like, you're in my prayers. You're in my prayers sometimes more than traditional priests who are assaulted with a whole new realm of things. If they can stay in their diocese, if they're going to be assaulted spiritually or some other way because of their adherence to tradition. But you guys are really in my prayers. I mean, all priests should be. But I've been able to meet and just talk with a lot of you. And I really do rejoice in the way, because at the end of the day, you know, the reality is that, yo, Kevin, good to see you. God bless to good diocesan priests. It's not always easy. That's true. And again, as much as I really do love the Fraternity of St. Peter, the Institute of Christ the King, the SSPX, Jordan, it's over. As much as I love these groups, the core of how the Catholic priesthood is not found in religious orders like that. The core has to be good diocesan priests. That's going to be the priest who really does, like, obviously those are the most widespread kinds of priests. So it just would be unfair just to kind of leave them out on a lurch, because they have to go through a ton of stuff. Obviously, traditional priests, priests of the fraternity, priests of the institute, it's a whole different set of problems. Similar, but sometimes a whole different set of problems. They don't have to worry about pushing too much tradition into their liturgies. But I've seen a lot of priests who they do that and then they get relegated, diocesan priests. They get relegated to the border parishes, right? They get relegated to the country parishes where I come from. And that's sad. I'm hoping that that's changing. And I welcome it when I see a priest who says, man, I became a priest because I gave up women to follow after the Lord. Okay, it's a high call. So yes, I'm going to wear my long cassocks. And yes, I'm going to celebrate Ad Orientem. And I'm going to make sure we have altar boys. And I'm going to make sure that we have beautiful chant. And I want the church to be not just a very beautiful place, but I want it to be a very reverent place as well. And yes, I can't celebrate a Latin Mass, and I'm not going to go join the fraternity today, but I'm going to just try my hardest. And those guys are really in my prayers. I very much appreciate those guys. I think it is very much worth the fight. So that's kind of the tail end of my conversation, guys. I've really been meditating on this because, I'm now in a diocese where I see these really, really vibrant Latin Mass parishes, and it's so beautiful. I've had that great experience since I've been celebrating Mass in tents in Los Angeles, since I've celebrated Mass in Gothic cathedrals now, the traditional Latin Mass. I've celebrated in Marriott hotels. Like, I've kind of been getting the full spectrum of things, and I rejoice in all that. And I hope that Pope Leo really implements Summorum Pontificum again. I hope that Pope Leo, in his charity and in his wisdom, really does not continue the policy from Rome of being just very, very cruel to traditional sons. But I'm also in a diocese that has undergone shrinking, and it sucks when you go to a church and you see some of those issues that are still there that are driving people to just go, this faith isn't really worth fighting for. And I think that, as Benedict talked about, right, the church of the future is going to be smaller, but it's going to be more vibrant. It's going to be more faithful, actually, ironically. There's a funny line from the young pope where he says, you cannot measure love in numbers. You can only measure it by intensity. And that is something that I want to see for all of our masses. So that's kind of the thing. Rudy, bogus Ordo. Yeah, you know it, bro. But hey, thank you all for watching and for listening. I'd love to get your thoughts, especially here as I close out. I don't know if you attend the traditional Latin Mass or maybe you attend the Novus Ordo. And whether you do, you're more than welcome here on the Glad Trad podcast. This is a podcast that I started a few years ago. And the reason why is because I fell in such love with Christ thanks to the traditional Latin Mass. It really helped me when I was out struggling in Los Angeles, especially. The Latin Mass has been there through my highs and my lows, traditional forms of piety, kind of the rediscovery of Catholic orthodoxy. And that's something that I just want to kind of have a great space for. At the same time, I'm also a sanguine, like normal trad. So I felt like while it's nice to have a lot of very heady, serious trads, and God bless them, they do great work, it's also totally fine to kind of have a more sanguine kind of space. So closing thoughts, this is why Jordan kicked me off the potty. Oh, Rudy, we're going to have some tea. Rudy, you should come back on, but you playing. You decided to go and have daughters, bro. So love you. Say it back. I love you, Kevin. I do. I hope that you're doing all right, my brother. But anyway, friends, if you've been enjoying the show and you haven't subscribed yet, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Just really, really helpful. We're on the road to 8,000 subscribers. Also, please check out the Patreon in the link below. I just kind of did a restructuring of the Patreon goals. Tiers, I should say. I just simplified it a little bit, so it's a little easier to navigate. And if you'd like to support the show, very much would appreciate that. And thank you all so much. God bless you and may He keep you. And I'll see you on the next one. Adios.